Hey guys, I am about to start plumbing a race car here in the shop, and I figured I would go over how I go about this. So as you can tell, all of this stuff, right, all this can be rather intimidating, right? You go, God dang, I just spent a whole bunch of money. Where do I start? So I was going to lay out kind of how I go about doing things. So everything you see in this video today is going to be a crimped fitting, but the majority of these fittings can be had in, screw together. If you decide that you want to have fittings crimped, let me know. As long as it's Earl's Ultra Pro or Earl's Ultra Flex, I crimp it for free. So I made another video on how to set that up before, how to do your hose before you send the hoses to me to have them crimped. Little side note. Anyway, so we're gonna plumb this car. This is a turbo alcohol car. I have to plumb the oil drain to a scavenge pump, which is not here yet. And I have to plumb the fuel system, which I am still waiting on a fuel filter. And then I also have to plumb, the oil feed line, a couple other little things, but there's no coolant. But it's a pretty tight configuration underneath the hood when it comes to plumbing. So what I like to use a lot of is these. They're direct thread fittings, right? So the fuel rails on this car are 12AN O-ring, and this is a direct thread fitting that accepts a 12AN hose, and then I crimp a collar around here. It's a lot smaller, tighter, compact to the rail, and I'll show you here in a minute, why that's actually important for this application especially. Another thing that I am a big fan of using is these Earl's Y blocks. So these are machined Y blocks. They don't come with all this stuff, but it's 10AN over here, 10AN over here, and then 12AN O-ring over here. So all O-ring fittings, right? So we take the way we're going to plumb this is we're going to come out of the mechanical fuel pump into the filter, and the filter is actually 16AN O-ring. So what I'm going to do is direct thread a 12AN O-ring to 16AN O-ring adapter, so that we cut down on fittings, right? So instead of having to go from this to a male AN and then using a union, then doing another one over here, this is a little nicer. Earl's makes a nice step down for 16AN to 12AN. So you got a big hole, and then it steps it down to a smaller. So the other cool little thing that we're going to be using with this is his fuel rails are 12AN, like I said. These fittings are 10AN O-ring. So what we're doing, you can't fit a 12AN B nut next to each other on these. So what I'm doing here is I've got a 10AN O-ring to 10AN male right here, right? That's 10AN. But this fitting from Earl's is a 10AN nut for 12AN hose. So kind of slick that you can jump up and down sizes and whatnot in the hose. So the purpose of this video though is so that you can try to figure out a way to plumb a car that's going to be difficult to plumb and not catch it on fire, or not have your hoses too short, too long, whatnot. So I've already got some fittings on the engine. We're going to take this with us because I already know where this is going to sit on the car, and then the filter is going to be over here, and we'll look over how we're going to do this. So let's take this here, and we're going to go over here and look at the car. So here's those direct thread fittings, right? So I'm running a 90 here. The reason why plumbing and people that plumb cars for a living, like Brown and Miller and whatnot, why they get so much money is because you have to have a good bit of inventory. Now, as the hobbyist guy who's just putting together their own race car, I'm going to make a suggestion, and a lot of you think I'm dumb, but if you're on a budget, okay, what you need before you do anything is the fittings, not necessarily the hose, okay? So if, say you're going to buy Earl's Ultra Pro or Ultra Flex hose and fittings and whatnot, right? Or whatever brand you're going to buy, but I only use Earl stuff. Might I suggest that you order up all of your fittings that you potentially think you may need, and order a couple extra, right? So don't be afraid to take an extra $300, order extra fittings, and have them so that you can kind of play with what you ordered. And then just return what you don't use, right? So if you order 5 90s and 5 45s and 5 60-degree fittings, and you only use 3 of each, return them. Just don't open the packages, just return them. You get your money back, take that money as a credit, and now you can use that money towards your hose that you need to make the connections, right? So the reason that the majority of plumbing jobs, wiring jobs, final put-togethers on cars come out like crap is because y'all get in your head that you need to get this done in like a day, and you go on Summit and you overnight 100 damn fittings that are all wrong, and you didn't look at anything in the first place. So might I suggest, if you don't want to go through the process of the return thing, order up 190, order up 145, order up 160-degree fitting, and mock them up, right? And then write down notes. So like with this car, I ordered up a surplus of fittings, and then what I'll do is I'll either keep them in stock here or I'll send them back. I'll probably just wind up keeping them in stock because I use so many of them, and I mock up what is going to work and what isn't going to work. So back here, if we look, this fuel rail is kind of further ahead than the other side. So the other side, I put a 90 on, and we'll go to that side over there in a minute because we have to avoid this throttle rod. But we can't put a 90 here because if we put a 90 here, we're going straight down into the valley. Now we got to try to come across and underneath past this cam sync. It's just not going to come out clean. And we know that, I know that I want to run the wiring along, or the hoses along here, right? Underneath of this throttle rod, up along this bar, and hit my Y block that I've got in my other hand from the filter, right? So this one needed a 60, right? So this was a 60, a 45 was a little bit too much pointing back, so I went with a 60 there. We go over here, this is where the direct thread fittings really come into play. Majority of the time what people do is they pick up one of these, and that's an O-ring to an adapter, right? Now if we just look, the packaging size on this, we're getting pretty close to this. So this is the throttle rod on this car, and we don't have a ton of clearance. So I went with a direct thread 45 here to be able to kick this forward. And the direct thread and the crimp fittings, they're all lower profile, right? So by being lower profile, it may seem like I'm splitting hairs here, but if we had this fitting and then we had to put the large 12AN B-nut on top of this fitting would have to sit out somewhere about there, right? In order for it to clear the side of the intake manifold. Well, now all we've got is a crimp collar, and I can roll this fitting over like so, and it pays dividends because now we have a lot of clearance off of this throttle rod as opposed to being pointing straight at it. So again, don't be afraid to order up a couple extra fittings and mock up what you need and return what you don't. So these direct thread fittings are, to me, they're fantastic. In the back here, I had to do a 90, right? So the reason being is a 60 puts us into the firewall. This fuel rail's a little bit longer. It is a big block Chevrolet, so it has to be a little longer over here just because of the cylinder placement. So we have to do a 90. So what the goal here is I'm going to come down again. If we look over the top, let me take the camera. If we look over the top, right, it's real close, right? So if we had a B-nut going on there, if we'd use this adapter and then a B-nut, like standard fitting, we would have been all up into that intake manifold. But with having a direct thread fitting, we can clear that intake manifold, kick back towards the center of the car, and have enough room for a nice clean radius to come and lay on top of the other side, have it run right along here, come up here, up along that bar. I'll be able to attach it to that bar. And then this guy is going to be right around here. Again, I'm still waiting on a fuel filter, but by my measurements, I believe this is going to be right around here. So if this is right around here, we can have our hoses come straight off, down right here, and then sneak up underneath this bar and go straight back on over. So again, this may seem, some of y'all may be watching this and think that this is pretty trivial, but it pays off if you take a little bit of time. Consider all the moving parts. You know, like this is a big moving part. This is going to spin, right? It's spinning, right? So you don't want any hoses anywhere near that. Always consider where you have to mount things. And then the number one thing you want to avoid with these fuel lines and oil lines and all that kind of stuff is all the stuff that gets hot, right? So this pump is going to be probably the hardest part to deal with, right? So this is our fuel pump. And if we come over here, right down there's our inlet of our fuel pump. Oh, keep going. Right there. So there's our inlet down there of our fuel pump, right? So, look at go. Right there. So there's our inlet of our fuel pump, but we're really close to the block. We're going to have to come through that hole, this opening, between the header and the mid plate or the motor plate. And what I want to do is I want to bring it up kind of in the area that's got the highest amount of space. I'm going to come up along here. I'll follow this, and it's going to go right into the fuel filter. So this is his fire nozzle. This fire nozzle is actually going to get pivoted over this direction to give us a little bit more clearance over here. So when we come off the other side of the fuel filter will land somewhere about here, and I'm going to do a 90-degree going straight down that way. So we cut down on the amount of adapters and whatnot. We're going to do a 90-degree direct thread, and then we can attach that hose right here to this bar, this down bar right here, and we can come right along here underneath of this, and we can attach it over. We can strain relieve it over here onto the motor plate. So, in closing, really the purpose of this video is don't just force yourself to work with the few fittings that you have. You wind up spending more money by being cheap than you do by just spending a couple extra dollars up front and putting together a finished result that is a lot nicer, lasts a lot longer, and gives you less trouble. So hopefully y'all learn a little bit of something out of this. And if you got any interest in having me crimp your fittings for you, feel free to reach out. I do that, but you're gonna have to follow some instruction in order for me to do it for you for free. And if you got any questions about certain fittings and you want to make this fitting work on this and yada yada, we're a dealer for Holley, which is Earl's and whatnot. It's the only brand of hose that I use. Is Ultra Pro and Ultra Flex. So if you've got any questions or whatever on different fittings and how they work with different hose, the easiest way to answer that is Ultra Pro works with Ultra Pro, Ultra Flex works with Ultra Flex. It doesn't interchange with anything else. So if you want to order any of that stuff, hit us up. If you've already got it and you want me to crimp it, let me know. Be happy to do it for free for you. If you've got any questions on how to plumb it, rewatch this video. And don't ask me questions about that because it should be pretty self-explanatory after watching this. So, all right, see you.